Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that shows how true heroes often hide behind the simplest of roles, where humility meets legacy, and where a single name can change the entire atmosphere of a room. It's a story about a man who was serving coffee in a naval briefing room, unaware that the moment his call sign was spoken, the room full of admirals, officers, and young recruits would fall completely silent. The day began like any other at the naval base. The officers were preparing for a high-level strategy meeting, maps and files spread across the long table, the hum of conversations echoing against the walls. In the corner of the room, an elderly man quietly moved with a coffee pot, refilling cups with steady hands, a humble smile on his face. He wore a simple uniform, his name tag slightly faded. Most of the younger officers didn't even know who he was. To them, he was just the man who served coffee every morning before the big discussions began. He never spoke much, never interfered, never tried to draw attention to himself. Yet there was something about his presence calm, disciplined, and precise that seemed oddly familiar to the few older officers in the room. He carried himself with quiet dignity, the kind that can't be learned overnight. Still, no one asked, and he never volunteered to tell. The briefing began. The Admiral, a man known for his commanding presence, walked in, and the room snapped to attention. Discussions started about an upcoming naval exercise, a test that would push both men and machines to their limits. Maps of coastal zones, aerial formations, and ship routes covered the screen. Officers exchanged updates, debating tactics and analyzing every possible move. The coffee man, standing in the corner, continued his duty, pouring a cup here, wiping a table there. He looked invisible to most of them, but he watched everything quietly, his sharp eyes catching every detail. At one point, a young lieutenant made a suggestion about flight patterns, a strategy involving drone-assisted reconnaissance. The Admiral, while listening, suddenly paused. His gaze shifted toward the older man by the coffee table. For a moment, the Admiral's expression changed from focus to surprise, then to recognition. He tilted his head slightly, squinting as if trying to confirm what he was seeing. Then, in a tone that cut through the chatter of the room, the Admiral said a single phrase, "Is that you, Ghost Falcon?" The room froze. Every conversation stopped. The young officers looked around, confused. Ghost Falcon. They whispered to one another. That name wasn't just a nickname, it was a legend, a call sign spoken in reverence among Navy circles. It belonged to one of the most skilled pilots in naval history, a man who flew missions that weren't even supposed to exist on paper, a man whose real identity was classified for decades. The old man slowly turned, his eyes meeting the Admiral's. For a moment no one breathed, then he gave a faint nod. That was all the confirmation anyone needed. The Admiral stepped forward, his voice soft now, filled with respect. "Sir," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd meet you in person." The younger officers were stunned. The man they had seen every morning, carrying a coffee pot and cleaning up after their meetings, was the legendary pilot whose missions had saved countless lives. The Admiral gestured for him to sit, but the man shook his head politely. "I'm fine right here," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and steady, the voice of someone who had seen war, loss, and triumph all in one lifetime. One of the younger officers, still processing what he had just heard, finally spoke. "You're Ghost Falcon, the pilot from Operation Silent Tide." The old man smiled faintly. "That was a long time ago, son," he replied. "Back when jets still had a heartbeat and the sky was a battlefield you could smell." The Admiral asked him how he ended up here, in a small naval base serving coffee. The old man simply said, "After years in the sky, I just wanted to stay close to the sound of it. I didn't need medals or recognition. I just wanted to help the next generation keep flying." His humility silenced the room more than his call sign had. Everyone felt a mixture of awe and guilt. They had walked past him for months, never realizing who he was. The Admiral, still visibly moved, asked him to share one story, one lesson that the young men and women in the room could carry with them. The old man set down the coffee pot, took a deep breath, and began to speak. He told them about a night mission decades ago, when his squadron had been ambushed over the open sea. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and flying on fumes. His co-pilot was wounded, Communication was down, and visibility was near zero. He could have turned back, could have saved himself, but instead he flew into the storm to guide the rest of his team out. I learned that night. He said quietly that courage isn't about fighting until you die. It's about doing what's right even when no one will ever know you did it, because honor isn't in the medals, it's in the moments no one sees. The Admiral nodded slowly, his eyes glistening with respect. The younger officers were silent, hanging on every word. The man continued, sharing small pieces of wisdom about discipline, leadership, and what it meant to carry the weight of command. The best pilots, he said, aren't the ones who chase glory. They're the ones who bring everyone home. As he spoke, the Admiral ordered someone to bring him a chair, but again the old man refused. "I've spent my life sitting in cockpits," he said with a small grin. "Standing feels right now." His words carried a mix of humor and wisdom, lightening the tension but deepening the respect in the room. When he finished, there was silence again, not because there was nothing left to say, but because everyone was processing the weight of what they had just witnessed. The Admiral finally broke the silence. "Ghost Falcon," he said softly, "you may have retired from flying, but your wings are still teaching." The old man nodded, smiled, and quietly stepped back toward the corner of the room. He picked up his coffee pot, ready to continue as if nothing had happened. But from that day onward, no one saw him as just the man who served coffee. Every officer in that room began greeting him with a salute, a gesture of deep respect. Even the Admiral, whenever he passed by, would pause, place his hand to his heart, and nod. Word spread throughout the base. Some thought it was just a rumor that the legendary Ghost Falcon was working in the briefing room, but those who had seen him knew it was true. They knew that sometimes heroes don't retire because they're tired. They retire because they've already given everything. Weeks later, during a training flight, one of the young pilots who had been in that meeting used a maneuver inspired by Ghost Falcon's old tactics. When asked later where he learned it, he smiled and said, "From the man who serves coffee." It became a saying around the base, a reminder that greatness often hides behind humility. The Admiral later arranged for a small plaque to be placed near the briefing room door. It read, "In honor of Commander Ghost Falcon, who taught us that service never ends." The old man never mentioned it, never even acknowledged it, but everyone knew he'd seen it. Some mornings, when he thought no one was watching, he'd pause near the plaque, his eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow, then move on to refill another cup. As time passed, Ghost Falcon became a quiet legend within those walls again, this time not for the missions he flew, but for the example he set. Young recruits began to whisper his name like a prayer before their first flights, hoping to carry even a fraction of his courage into the sky. He continued serving coffee, mentoring quietly, and occasionally sharing a word of advice with anyone willing to listen. The Admiral often said, "Some men leave behind medals, others leave behind a legacy that never lands." Years later, when the Admiral retired, his final speech included a tribute to Ghost Falcon. He said, "Every briefing, every mission, every success we've had these past years carries the fingerprints of one man who chose humility over fame." He reminded us that leadership isn't about titles, it's about character. When the Admiral stepped down, the old man was still there, still serving coffee, still smiling the same quiet smile. One morning, though, he didn't show up. The staff checked his small quarters and found only a folded flight jacket on his bed and a note that read, "My shift is over. Keep flying." The Admiral himself attended the small memorial that followed. No grand ceremony, no parade, just a flag, a cup of coffee placed on a wooden table, and the sound of jets flying overhead. The base observed a moment of silence, and the Admiral whispered, "Fly high, Ghost Falcon." To this day, the story of the man who served coffee in the briefing room remains one of the most retold stories among naval aviators. It's a story of humility, honor, and the quiet strength that defines true heroes. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest among us don't need to be seen to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is a name, a call sign, and the memory of what that name stood for to remind us of the true meaning of service and sacrifice. If you ever find yourself walking past someone who seems ordinary, take a closer look. You never know if behind that calm smile lies a legacy that once touched the sky.